This is a very quick tutorial on how to use the custom user styles in Chroma Pro. So if we start by just adding a Chroma Pro stack to our page, and this time what we'll do is we'll just drop some different content into it other than a menu, and we'll use a header as an example. And the first thing we're going to do is just give this a bit of style. So we're going to make it a yellow color, let's say, and let's just change it so that it says Chroma. Now you may have something alongside an existing menu, or you may be building a menu or using button bar to build a menu, and in which case you can style other things just by giving them a custom class. So we're going to go down to the bottom of these header pro settings and just call this menu header with a hyphen in it. If the stack you want to use doesn't have a custom class selector, you can always put it in one of Joe's CSS box stacks and address it that way. So what we're going to do with this, we're going to have it as a fixed position menu at the top of the page, and we'll leave pretty much all the settings at default, and then we're going to change the color of the bar, and we'll leave this at this blue color. Let's perhaps add a bit of padding top and bottom when we change the color. So we're going to need a marker to tell it when to adopt this setting, and we'll put it just at the top of our page text here. I'm just going to leave the style names as the default style one for now. So if we preview that, we'll see that when we get to our marker, as expected, we get our padding and the color change. But it'd be nice to change the color of that header, which is what we're here to do. And for that, we have custom user styles. So when it's something that's not in the predefined settings, like menu colors, which will do all the major menu bars and their hover stars and drop downs, then we can use custom styles. And we've got four to play with, sorry. And you can see in the first control we've got the selector. Now this can be a class or an ID or even an attribute, and you can stack them up with commas as well, so you can refer to several things in your bar at once. In this case, we just want to refer to dot menu header, so that's going to address the menu header class. And you can see the default settings are to change the color, which is what we want, but let's change that to white, so we'll make that #FFF. You could just type white in there if you want to use one of the standard colors. And you see there's a transition setting here as well. Now by default, again, that's set to color, so we can just leave that as it is, and we should now have our color change on scroll. So there we go. As well as the menu bar changing, we've changed our custom class color. So that's very easy. But I just want to mention a more advanced usage where you may want to change two things at once. So if we think about changing the opacity at the same time, so we might want to make the opacity 0.8 as we change the color. And for that, we would set the opacity as the parameter, 0.8 as the value, and we want to transition the opacity this time. Now the way CSS transitions work is they all have to be on one line. Now each one of these user styles is going to write a block of CSS code as per these instructions. So what's going to happen if we did this is that the menu header item is only ever going to have a transition of opacity, because the last instruction written will win. If they're different selectors, it's fine, you can use different things. So all we need to do in this case, and this is really a bit of an advanced case, is just get rid of the color out of there and put it in there with a comma. So now we're going to transition the color to white. We're going to transition the opacity to 0.8, and our transition, which is going to get used for the menu header class, is going to be color 200 milliseconds ease, opacity 200 milliseconds ease. Now we could in fact change the opacity timing so that takes longer. We could make that 500, but the key is that transitions all have to be on one line of code for a given selector, like the menu header. That's the only time that this gets a bit complicated. If we now preview that, we now see that the opacity drops as well as the color changing. If we were to make that a bit more extreme, so we can make it 0.2, then it really fades and you see the difference. And the two things transition smoothly together. Now, while we've got this project open, I just wanted to show you one other thing that we can do, and this is to do with markers and offsets. Imagine if we wanted to change the style of the menu when we get to the bottom of the page. So let's create a new fixed style while we're up here, and I'm just going to copy that one and change the background to red, so then we'll have all our padding settings already there and everything else will stay the same, including our transition, so nothing's going to change other than the background color. And we're going to call this style page bottom, and we therefore need a marker for our page bottom, which we're going to put, unsurprisingly, at the bottom of the page. And let's just make sure we've got that named the same before we do anything else. Now, markers trigger when they get to the top of the page, plus or minus this offset that we define here. So what we need to do is we need this marker to trigger when it comes onto the bottom of the page, not when it gets to the top, because it's never going to get to the top. So for that, we have marker units of browser height. So we can offset this marker by the full height of the browser, so push it down to the bottom, and it will then trigger when it comes on at the bottom rather than when it goes off at the top. So what we need to do is move this apparent position of this marker up by the height of the browser, so that when the actual marker itself comes onto the page at the bottom here, then its trigger position is an entire browser height up. So we're going to need a negative marker offset. We're going to add minus. Now, the first thing you might think, well, if we add minus 100% of the browser height, we're going to be good to go. And the trouble with browsers is they bounce. And if we get down to the bottom of our page, if I hold it at the bottom of the page with my touchpad, then yes, it works. But because of the bounce, it just comes back slightly and we lose it. So the solution is very simple, is we don't use exactly 100. Let's say use 105%, because then it will get to the top of the screen. We're going to make it 105% offset upwards. So it will get to the top of the screen just slightly before we actually scroll to the bottom. And it will mean you don't get that nasty bounce. So you can scroll down to the bottom, and I can even flick it down to the bottom with the bounce, and it'll stay red. So that's a simple way that you can make markers relative to the bottom of the page instead of relative to the top of the page. And you can play around with this value depending on how far off. I mean, if we made this 125%, then it will trigger a lot sooner than the bottom of the page. So we're going to get sort of that behavior. So you might want it to trigger when a footer comes into view, something like that. But it's very easy once you realize that you've just got to move the apparent position of the marker up relative to the height of the browser, and we get our 3-state bar finished. Thanks for watching. I hope that's been useful, and I'll see you next time.